Hello gentlemen, this is Adam and this is the state of RedShift in the year of 2022. The version of Cinema 4D that we are working with, or the version that I have open right now, is R26. Now, Cinema 4D has nothing to do with this. Whether you are using RedShift with Cinema 4D or using RedShift with a Blender or using RedShift with whatever software you are, RedShift is still RedShift. It's supported by the M1 if you are having M1 or M2 or M Pro, so by the Apple Silicon, it is supported without any issues. And the version that we are working with for today is the version 3.5.8. So let's go ahead and take a look at the settings for RedShift. So here I do have RedShift and I do have the project open. We go to RedShift and then we go to Systems. So in Systems, with Cinema 4D at least, you would have pocket size. So pocket size, you do have 128, you can go to 64, or you can go to 512, depending on what you have. If you have the M1 Max, I would say go to 512. If you have the M1 Pro, I would say go to 256. If you have the M2, I would go to 128. If I have like more than 16 gigabyte of RAM, but if I have less than 16 gigabyte of RAM, I would definitely go 64, or maybe try to balance it at the 128. It really depends, but I would maybe look at the 64 if I have only 8 gigabyte of RAM, whether with M1 or M2. With that being said, what I would leave it at is 512. RedShift, usually it's an render engine that focuses on the GPU, so when it will be working, it will only be rendering through the GPU. However, recently, that's actually changed, where now you do have two options with RedShift. With RedShift, you do have the GPU version or you do have the CPU version. Let's say you bought Cinema 4D. The version that is included with Cinema 4D of RedShift is actually only the CPU version, which I do not recommend using at all. However, the GPU version is there. If you do not have access to anything other than the CPU version, you can use it, you can test it, but I do recommend getting the GPU version overall because it has a better performance and faster performance overall, and we will be looking at performance in a later minute. However, there are multiple videos that I have done in that regard where I go in depth, so you can go ahead and check them. Now, let's go ahead and start an APR. Now, this APR that we are starting is actually through RedShift. Now, it's giving me a warning at the very bottom that, hey, change the pocket setting to 512. We have changed it already, so no need to worry about that. It's showing me the warning because when I first opened the software, the default was 128, and then I was changing between it, so do not mind that warning. As long as you change it, you will be good to go. And we can actually double check that we have changed it just by going here and then going to Systems. We do have it at 512, and the APR took 32 seconds to open and then be stable. That's actually good because this project is heavy. In order to render this project, you need around 5 minutes, and it's a still image. The beauty about APR, even when you are changing with the project and then moving around, you would actually be able to unlock the camera right here. So right now, what I am doing is I do have the progressive render on, and the progressive render is actually set on 128. So if we go to the basic, the progressive render is set to 128. I can set it to 1000, or I can set it to less. Keep in mind, the higher the number, the slower the progressive render. The slower the number, the faster the progressive render. So I do have it at 128. When I move around, the progressive render would be moving with me, and then the APR would be moving with me as well. Now, for the APR, you do have two options. You can either set it through a separate window, just like how I did right now, just going here and then starting the APR. So we can actually go ahead and do that. So I close the APR, and then we will close another APR right here, and then we will wait for the APR. So now you do the whole view that you are working with is the APR instead of having the APR open in a separate window. Now keep in mind, we are recording the screen, and even though we are recording the screen, actually the performance is good, and you do have the progressive render at 128, so you can maybe slow it to something like 68 or 64, which it would be faster. And actually, let's do that. So let's go ahead and Command B, and then let's change that to 64. With 64, it's now faster. However, keep in mind, again, I am recording the screen. That's why I hate recording the screen when I am doing renders, because it would not give you the actual performance, but in general, it's rendering here at the bottom. Now, what I would like to have is I would like have RedShift render view. Now, render view is very similar to APR, but the only difference is you can do the pocket rendering, you can take a look at that, and you can even have a render region. So for example, this thing right here, if you click on it, it will only focuses on a region and it will be rendering that region as well. So right now I switched it to bucket render and I was like, you know what, just render that region. So let's say we want a closer region of that, and then I just wanted to do a bucket render, which is not a progressive render, and usually it's heavier, and I only want it to be on that part right here. That bucket render is finished and actually didn't take a lot of time. I didn't even count it. Oh, well, actually it was counted here at the bottom. It took only 6.77, like 6 seconds for it to render that portion right here, and that's actually amazing. So you can definitely see now this portion is being rendered completely and how your render would look like. Then you can turn it off. And of course you do have a lot of options in order. You can have it as auto or as render or front, perspective, the first camera, right? So for example, we can go to the first camera and then from the first camera it will show us that view. But since I unlocked the camera and I removed it, it did it differently. Now this is the right size, this is the top, and this is the front. Usually I have it as auto and it will decide whatever it needs to change. Now if you want it to render completely, you can go ahead and click render right here and it will start rendering the whole scene as well. If you want to take stills, you can actually do snapshots from here as well, and then you can assign them as A and B in order to do a comparison between the two. And I love that because sometimes you want to do comparisons, so you can do that. And even if you want to do comparisons for more than A and B, you can just keep taking images and then you would be able to have multiples as well. And the performance is well optimized and there is no issues with it. If there is any questions or concerns, you know where to add them. And if you want to support the channel, gentlemen, I'm sure you know how to do it. Aside from that, I will see you very soon. Take care.